Hey there! It's great to see you here on this beautiful Monday, and I hope you're having an amazing start to the new week. If you're new here, my name's Brooke, and I enjoy researching strange occurrences, true crime, conspiracy theories, etc., and sharing my findings with like-minded and curious individuals. If you're not new here, then welcome back, friends. Today is a bit of a double feature in which we'll be discussing a law enforcement strategy that is commonly used in drug-related investigations involving the recruitment of police informants or confidential informants. Before I get into explaining this concept and the cases we will be covering, I just want to give a general overview of how drug operations are generally organized. Now, I know you all definitely stay on the straight and narrow and have probably heard a lot of this from watching movies and television shows, but stick with me, alright? Typically, drug trafficking organizations are arranged in a vertical hierarchy, meaning that there are a few very powerful people at the top and less important and less powerful people at the bottom. Of course, there are other structures utilized, such as a horizontal hierarchy, but for the sake of today's video, we're just going to stick to this triangle-shaped structure. So at the top, we have our drug lords or kingpins, the commonly known Pablo Escobars and El Chapos, who are in charge of the entire operation. They strategically appoint members below them, create alliances and rivalries, as well as manage other illegal activities of high importance, such as approving high-level assassinations. Then beneath these leaders are many sub-organizations related to kidnapping, money laundering, weapon distribution, and others. In terms of the illegal drug trade, we have producers growing or synthesizing the drugs, maybe importers and national wholesalers if the drug originates from another country, local wholesalers selling within a region who then pass their product or products onto your local neighborhood dealer, which then ends up in the hands of the consumer. In the simplest of terms, the higher up you go up the pyramid, the more important the individual filling their particular role is. Every position is vital for accomplishing the common goal of profit, but some have more room for error than others. Each job typically has several individuals responsible for a single task to ensure continuity if one person happens to get caught up by law enforcement. If a member is apprehended by police, they are instructed to only provide information that has little or no impact on the entire operation, if any at all, and this is by design. Keeping the high-level members at the top of the pyramid is one of the main priorities for each role. If there's no leader, then the entire operation will crumble and everyone will lose their livelihood and potentially even their lives. Upsetting any facet of a cartel is pretty much not an experience that anyone will escape unscathed. When federal agencies do manage to capture a kingpin, it's a pretty big deal, and for good reason. It can take years, even decades, of difficult and complex planning by law enforcement to finally dismantle these high-ranking leaders in order to protect public safety. After all, drug trafficking organizations pose threats to individuals, communities, and to society as a whole. While drug lords are often glamorized in the media, portraying them as enigmatic rebels who defy the law and societal norms while touting a luxurious lifestyle of mansions, exotic animals, and supercars, their operations greatly contribute to many societal issues. Addiction and overdose, high violent crime rates, institutional corruption, poor economy, threats to national security, the list goes on and on. But what exactly are these difficult and complex operations that law enforcement use against these seemingly all-powerful groups? There are several tactics that law enforcement agencies use in efforts to stop these criminal enterprises, but at the most basic level, they involve tackling the lowest-ranking members of the hierarchy and working their way up the chain. Now, who exactly am I talking about when I say these lowest-ranking members? Well, the thing is, most of these people probably don't even consider themselves members at all. You know, all those suspicious people in trench coats that randomly hand out drugs that they warned you about in the DARE program? This hypothetical person doesn't appear to really be raking in the cash cash, they probably don't even plan on doing this long term. Maybe it's a nice side hustle for a while, and the last thing on their mind is the fact that their profits are just a drop in the absolute ocean of cash, which a kingpin somewhere is swimming in, living his best life. And don't forget about the customer buying the product, because without them, the drug trade would not be as lucrative as it is. Even without the intent to further distribute, they are just as important as those who do in the eyes of law enforcement. They are the first step in taking down the head honchos. This is where the strategy of recruiting confidential informants comes in. According to the Department of Justice, a confidential informant is a secret source who, through a contact, supplies information on criminal activity to the police or law enforcement agent. So in speaking about illicit substances, police officers often make deals with people who are facing criminal charges, but are not believed to be a major threat to society. For example, a young person selling a relatively small quantity, or somebody struggling with a drug addiction who had substances in their possession for personal use. Law enforcement will offer reduced charges or sentencing in exchange for this minor criminal offender cooperating and acting as an informant and gathering information to aid larger police takedowns. As they move up the hierarchical pyramid using this newfound information, they repeat the process and capture all of the bad guys. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? The citizen gets a reduced punishment, and the police are just one step closer to taking down these dangerous organizations. But what happens when things don't go according to plan? I mean, we're talking about cartels, drug dealers, and large amounts of money here. Everything can't possibly work out 100% of the time, and the stakes are unbelievably high. Rachel Morningstar Hoffman was born on December 17, 1984 in Clearwater, Florida, where she was raised until graduating from Countryside High School. When she wasn't spending time in nature with her free-spirited mom, Margie, she was very passionate about expressing herself artistically and taking advantage of the endless things that life has to offer. As a kid, she loved playing the flute and piano, dancing ballet, horseback riding, and as she grew up, she took a particular liking to cooking. All throughout her life, Rachel's family noted that she had no trouble making new friends wherever she went. Her bubbly personality and warm smile were captivating to a lot of people. One particular type of event where Rachel really enjoyed meeting new friends and expressing herself was the music festival scene. In addition to being a fun place to just enjoy live musical performances, music festivals can provide many opportunities to make new friends, express yourself, and for some, venture into the world of illicit substances. On February 27, 2007, Rachel was just months away from graduating from Florida State University when her involvement with these drugs altered the course of her life forever. That day, after driving just 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, she was pulled over for a speeding ticket when the arresting officer discovered just under an ounce of marijuana in her vehicle. Rachel was placed under drug court supervision and required to complete a rehab program where she would randomly submit to urinalysis screenings. Rachel initially had no problems in the program and passed all of her drug tests, but a year into the court-ordered treatment, Rachel went out of town to attend a funeral and failed to complete a required screening. The next month, in April 2008, she was arrested and spent a weekend in jail. Just 2 weeks after her release, Rachel's neighbors contacted authorities with complaints of a marijuana odor emanating from her apartment. They'd also seen a few people in and out of her residence, which triggered their suspicions that she was possibly dealing. When police arrived at her home and conducted a search, they found over 5 ounces of marijuana and 4 ecstasy pills hidden under her couch cushions. Now, facing the possibility of serving time in prison for these drug-related felonies like possession with intent to sell and maintaining a drug house, Rachel was extremely freaked out. I mean, she knew that she was in the wrong, but she seriously started to realize the impact that this could have on her future. After her graduation from Florida State, Rachel had planned on relocating to Arizona in order to pursue her dreams and attend culinary school. The temporary fun she was having with these substances was not worth risking the future that she was working hard towards. Realistically, police were not concerned about Rachel being a public safety issue. Was she breaking the law? Yes, but authorities described her as a very bright and very talented young girl, and even more importantly for them, they saw this arrest as a window of opportunity for the department. Back at the police department, Officer Ryan Pender sat Rachel down and attempted to cut her a deal. If she gave up the identities of other weed dealers in that area that she knew of, the state prosecutor would potentially seek to lessen her charges and sentencing in exchange for her assistance. Rachel initially refused to hand over these names, and while I'm unsure of the exact reason, there are a few that come to mind. My first thought is that when you enter into this type of lifestyle or business, it's just kind of an unspoken rule, like not to snitch on those who you're working with. Getting caught up by the police is just kind of an occupational hazard, and just because one person gets brought in doesn't mean you just start running your mouth and naming names, right? Not only because of loyalty, but because there is the possibility of retaliation that would make you wish you had just gone to jail, depending on who you're dealing with. Maybe she just didn't trust that the police would actually cut her a deal, considering they couldn't guarantee her anything, it was just a possibility. But after persuading her into going undercover as a confidential informant in a sting operation, Rachel decided that it was worth working alongside authorities if it meant preserving her dreams of working as a professionally trained chef. Rachel hastily agreed to work as a confidential informant for the department without ever consulting legal aid or her family. The sting operation was planned as follows. The police department would provide Rachel with $13,000 in cash, which she would use to purchase 1,500 pills of ecstasy, 2 ounces of cocaine, and 2 handguns from local dealers whom the department had been keeping an eye on. These dealers were 23-year-old Danilo Bradshaw and 25-year-old Andre Green. As soon as Rachel completed this transaction, police would move in and arrest the suspects. Now, the first of several issues with this sting operation was the fact that these large purchases that police expected Rachel to carry out were extremely out of character for her. She never bought that quantity of drugs at once before, so it would immediately be suspicious to anyone that knew her. Second of all, Rachel had zero experience with handling a weapon. Now all of a sudden, without the slightest hint of training, police just expected her to buy a firearm from 2 felons and have it be handled safely. It's worth noting that this would have been the largest drug bust in Tallahassee PD history if it all went according to plan, but that is tragically not what ended up happening. On May 7th, 2008, Rachel Hoffman climbed into her silver Volvo wearing jeans, a red and green striped t-shirt, black sandals, and a purse equipped with a hidden wire provided by authorities. She drove to the appointed meeting area, a public park called Forest Meadows Park in Tallahassee. Almost immediately, the operation starts to go south. The 2 dealers, Danilo and Andre, told Rachel to meet them at a parking lot 2 minutes down the road instead of the original meetup point that police were aware of. Police claimed to have pleaded with Rachel to stay at the Forest Meadows Park at 6:45 p.m., but she allegedly just ignored them and proceeded to meet at the secondary location. At some point along the way, Rachel's phone died and her microphone to communicate with police lost any and all connection. But if police were monitoring the situation as closely as they claim to be, why didn't they just follow her like they were supposed to? She only drove 2 minutes further down the road, and you're telling me that you just completely lost track of her? I haven't seen evidence to confirm, but I can only assume that Rachel was unaware that her phone had died and that she had lost connection with police. Otherwise, she would just have no reason to continue on with this sting operation if the police weren't even able to collect this as evidence. So Rachel reached the parking lot and met with the 2 dealers. During their exchange, one of the men opened Rachel's purse with the intent of robbing her, but he was surprised to find the wires from the surveillance equipment that police had placed there in order to record the interaction. Now, typical police protocols involve placing wires on a person's body, taped underneath their clothing, as it's much less conspicuous than carrying around a bag full of wires that you're expected to retrieve money out of. When discovering these wires, the 2 men wasted no time pulling out the gun that police had ordered Rachel to buy, and they shot her 5 times. They then disposed of her body in a ditch located in nearby Perry, Florida, and left her car by the ditch. She was discovered just 2 days later by police. As the story quickly made headlines and understandably upset a lot of people, police had the audacity to blame Rachel for being the one who named Danilo and Andre as targets for the operation, but apparently Rachel didn't know them well either. Police had asked her who she knew in terms of dealing, and if anything, she only knew of them. They also went as far as reporting her to be a known drug dealer, likely to better the department's image, even though she had never been charged or convicted of distributing drugs, only sentenced to rehab for possession the year prior. Her parents were pretty livid at the fact that the people who put her in the situation to begin with were openly painting her as this awful criminal who just had it coming. Tallahassee Police Department refused to take any responsibility for the role that they played in this young woman's untimely death. As the Hoffman family attorney later pointed out, Rachel was never even supposed to be used as a confidential informant to begin with. She was on probation for missing her drug screening previously, and her probation agreement explicitly prohibited her from being around anybody that had drugs. The Tallahassee Police Department was telling her to go against her court-ordered requirements in order to help them out, and didn't even bother asking permission or informing her probation officer. They didn't even run her through the plan of the sting operation, they just threw her into this highly volatile situation blindly. When you really stop and think about it, there was really no reason that Rachel needed to be physically placed in this drug deal to begin with. She easily could have just set up the drug deal with these guys, and instead, police would show up and arrest them on the spot. Danilo Bradshaw and Andre Green were arrested in Orlando not long after this entire operation went completely wrong. Although police found no solid evidence of exactly who pulled the trigger that killed Rachel Hoffman, 2 of Andre Green's jailmates testified that he admitted to being the one who committed the murder and had influenced Danilo to keep his mouth shut. In the end, Danilo was the one charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life without possibility of parole, and Andre was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole as well. Devastated at the fact that their daughter had fallen victim to a system meant to protect, Rachel's parents fought hard to change state legislation surrounding confidential informants. On May 7, 2009, the Florida State Senate passed Rachel's Law, which requires Florida law enforcement to give specialized training to informants, allow them to speak to a lawyer before agreeing, and make clear the uncertainty of the deal being made. Rachel's mom, Margie, runs the non-profit Rachel Morningstar Foundation, whose goal is to educate the public about the dangers of being a confidential informant. In my opinion, I think it's pretty clear that the police department were 100% more concerned about accomplishing this record-breaking bust, rather than this woman's safety, which is made obvious by the fact that they had absolutely no sympathy for her and basically blamed everything that happened to her on her. Narcotics enforcement agent Brian Sally even went on television and said that when operations utilizing CIs go wrong, it's usually the informant's own fault, which I'm just like, if things are going wrong so frequently that you're able to recognize a pattern, then why are you continuing to place these people in danger and withhold this knowledge? Oh yeah, because it wouldn't be beneficial to you, would it? Just as quickly as this entire operation had gone south, they turned around to the public and slandered Rachel's name in an attempt to blame her. She initially didn't even want anything to do with this. They stuck her in an extremely difficult situation and made her choose right then and there, as a lot of people in that position do accept. People who are chosen to be confidential informants are usually in an extremely vulnerable place in their lives to begin with and feel like they have no other option but to accept these deals as a second chance. In reality, police know this and use it to their advantage by not fully disclosing the potential risks. Today's second story takes place a little after Rachel Hoffman's horrible predicament, but we first have to jump back to 1993. Andrew Sadek was born on November 22nd in Valley City, North Dakota, to his loving parents, John and Tammy Sadek. He had an older brother, Nick, whom he got along with famously, and the family lived on a cattle ranch. Andrew was a quiet and shy kid, but he loved outdoor activities like hunting and fishing, and he really enjoyed working on the family's ranch. ranch. On July 22nd, 2005, when Andrew was only 11 years old, his 18-year-old brother Nick and Nick's girlfriend were tragically killed when a train hit their vehicle at an unmarked railroad crossing. To be expected, Andrew and his parents were completely devastated by the loss of their beloved Nick, but life had to continue. In 2012, Andrew attended North Dakota State College of Science on a scholarship with the goal of becoming an electrician and to study robotics. He was really passionate about these subjects, and he was at the top of his class, just absolutely killing it. When his nose wasn't stuck in the textbooks, Andrew continued working at his family's ranch in order to upkeep his modest lifestyle while being a full-time student. As Andrew settled into his routine and was feeling much more confident since he was doing so well at school, he really started to become more extroverted and outgoing, attending parties, and making new friends quite often. Eventually, with his newfound popularity, Andrew decided to start selling weed in 2013 for a bit of extra cash. Most of his transactions took place in the campus parking lot, and he was getting away with it swimmingly for a little bit. But after only a couple months, he was caught selling 4.5 grams of marijuana between two separate confidential informants on campus that had been working with police. These informants had presumably gotten caught doing the exact same thing that Andrew was doing and were closing in on him to save their own skin. In November of the same year, campus police searched Andrew's dorm room and found a grinder with a bit of weed residue on it, which Andrew admitted belonged to him. He wasn't immediately arrested, but on November 22nd, 2013, which also happened to be his 20th birthday, Andrew was brought in for questioning by the Richland County Sheriff, Jason Weber. Sheriff Weber told him that he was potentially facing felony drug charges that carried a total of 40 years in prison and a $40,000 fine. Hearing this news, Andrew was feeling like his adult life that had just began was already over. The sheriff told Andrew about this opportunity of working as a confidential informant, participating in sting operations to catch other dealers on campus in order to lessen charges and/or sentencing. Now, mind you that this officer is being very aggressive in describing this deal to Andrew, obviously very biased, and almost insinuating that Andrew would be crazy and stupid not to accept this offer in order to avoid ruining his life. Being in this type of situation for the first time, Andrew felt like he realistically had no other choice but to work with authorities. He signed a contract to accept this deal without ever consulting anybody he knew. He never even told his parents any aspect of this life. Not the marijuana, not the dealing, and especially he didn't want to freak them out with the knowledge of getting caught up with the law. Between November 2013 and January 2014, he bought weed from his peers 3 times while working for the department. The first 2 times were from one individual on campus in the parking lot, but the third time was a different dealer who Andrew didn't know and that the police had been keeping an eye on for a while. The deal was to take place in the city of Fargo. Police were now urging him to buy large amounts of marijuana in larger cities, and it was far more than he was used to. He was never as wrapped up in this business as police were now basically forcing him to be, and it was extremely out of character. So after this deal in Fargo, Andrew sort of decided that he had had enough of all of this. The deals that he was expected to be involved in were escalating, and he just started to fear the potential backlash of being caught acting as a narc. According to his contract, he had 2 more undercover deals to complete, but he didn't want to do it anymore. He never outright told police that he quit, but it was becoming very apparent that he was unresponsive to the officers and wasn't really interested. Besides, he was simultaneously stressed out about what his life was to look like after his rapidly approaching college graduation. His parents said that around this time he had started spending a lot of time with his new girlfriend and visiting other cities around the state in order to decide where he wanted to settle down and work after graduation. On April 30th, after returning back to his college to close out this monumental chapter in his life, Andrew went out with friends and they ended the night watching movies at the dorms. His friends ended up falling asleep, and when they woke up the next morning, realized that Andrew was nowhere to be found. At first, they had no real concern. They figured he had just left in the middle of the night or early in the morning to spend time with his new girlfriend. But the next day, when Andrew never showed up for his classes, his roommate reported him missing to campus police. Come to find out, the day that Andrew went missing was actually the very same day that he was required to complete his remaining 2 obligated stings. Campus security were pretty quick to take a look at the dorm security footage from the early morning hours of May 1st and saw Andrew leaving around 2 o'clock in the morning. He was wearing blue jeans, a hoodie, and a black backpack. He also had his phone, but it was turned off around this time. But other than the security footage, there were no other clues as to where Andrew disappeared off to. It seemed as if he had vanished out of thin air. But police wasted absolutely no time drawing their own little conclusions, and on May 5th, only 4 days after his disappearance, the department held a news conference informing the public of Andrew's disappearance amid his involvement with these sting operations. They went on to state that they strongly believed that he had just run away in order to avoid his punishment, so they went on to charge him with 2 felonies and encouraged him to turn himself in. And that's actually exactly how Andrew's parents found out about this entire situation at the same time as everyone else. And keep in mind, they knew absolutely nothing about their son's involvement with marijuana, working with police, his disappearance, nothing. Having just lost their second and last remaining child, the parents were devastated all over again. They put out public statements pleading for Andrew to just return home. No matter what the truth or the consequences ended up being, they just wanted their son back home safe. After a while, search teams were sent out to scour the surrounding wooded areas of campus, but they found no signs of Andrew. After 56 days of continuous searching, Andrew's remains were found in Breckenridge, Minnesota on June 27th at the bottom of a lake. He was found with a fatal head wound caused by a .22 caliber handgun, and he was actually found by a police diving team who were conducting a training exercise and just happened to accidentally come across his body. He was officially identified using dental records and estimated to have died within 2 days of his disappearance on May 5th. Oddly, the handgun that was used to kill him was never found, and neither was the hoodie that he was last seen wearing in the dorm security footage. He was, however, wearing a different hoodie that his parents didn't recognize, along with the backpack seen in the video. Even more strange, the backpack had been filled with rocks, as if to keep his body concealed under the water. Police were once again so quick to publicly speculate that Andrew had just killed himself in order to avoid imprisonment, even though the coroner officially ruled his death undetermined. From the very moment that his parents found out about all of this, they strongly felt that their son had been murdered. They denied him showing any signs of poor mental health in the months leading up to his death, and in fact, he seemed to be doing the best that he ever had, at least outwardly. Furthermore, they stated that the conditions surrounding their son's death and discovery were extremely suspicious, considering the fact that most people who commit suicide don't try and hide their bodies by weighing them down with rocks. And where was the murder weapon? His parents were extremely upset that police didn't seem to care enough to look further into the details of their son's death and just blatantly called him a criminal with no remorse. Federal agencies wouldn't take it seriously enough to investigate either. It was later found that Andrew's parents were actually missing a .22 caliber handgun from their house, but they still didn't take this as evidence pointing towards suicide. They believed that he took the gun for self-defense for wherever he vanished off to that fateful night. To even further support the parents' theory, they found some very interesting evidence upon retrieving Andrew's car from the campus after his death. When his parents opened the car to drive it away back to their house, they actually noticed that the carpet on the interior of the vehicle was completely soaking wet and that there were several inches of water trapped in the spare tire well in the trunk. And this just wasn't a simple leak from leaving a window cracked during the rain. The car appeared to have been driven into a body of water. Tammy believes that somebody drove her son's car to the river in order to dump his body and then returned the car to the campus to make it appear less suspicious and potentially buy them some time to get away. Tammy actually went to campus security to retrieve footage from the dorm parking lot that evening into the early morning of her son's disappearance, but of course, worse, the system had malfunctioned and failed to capture any footage. Shortly after this shocking realization, an unidentified person reported seeing 3 people cleaning out a car that they recalled looking eerily similar to Andrew's silver Volvo the same night that he disappeared. And to make this case even more horrifying than it already is, there was actually another student at the campus who had faced the exact same charges as Andrew previously, but since his mother was able to provide him with a lawyer, the student refused to work as an informant and was only sentenced to 2 years of probation and an $800 fine. Oh, how lovely to lessen the consequences of your actions when you have a little bit of money to act as a cushion. No, for real though, I am glad that the kid and this family had the resources to avoid this awful situation, but it is so completely unfair and just wrong that you can buy your way out of situations or end up dead by exploitation and overall selfishness by the people who are supposed to protect you. In 2016, feeling like she had run into a dead end trying to advocate for the son that she lost completely unnecessarily, Tammy begrudgingly filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Sheriff Weber on the grounds of fraud, negligence, and deceit during Andrew's time as a CI. I say begrudgingly because Tammy worried that the public would think she was just sue happy and money hungry, but she honestly just felt like this was the last option she had to call attention to this life-ending issue. She strongly felt that Sheriff Weber did not properly inform her son of the risks of being a CI or prepared him to face these risks and carry out the operation. In addition, the family's attorney pointed out that Andrew was made to believe that he was going to get thrown into prison for a very long time if he didn't participate. The attorney was quoted saying, "That's the most unrealistic view of somebody who sells a small amount of pot. They're not even going to jail in North Dakota as a first-time offender." Andrew didn't realize that it wasn't going to be that bad if he said no. Sadly, the case was dismissed in 2019 when the judge declared that there was not sufficient evidence to back Tammy's claims. Now tell me, if you found yourself in a position where police officers were offering you a deal to go undercover in exchange for leniency, and they tell you that they've got your back, they're going to be just yards away from you while you're meeting with these potentially dangerous individuals with the intent of snitching on them, and the whole time you'll be kept completely confidential, you probably feel a lot safer putting yourself in that position than if you knew that they weren't really watching you closely after all. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like if these young adults knew that death was a reasonable outcome in this deal that they made with police, they'd almost certainly just choose to do the time and call it a day. On April 24th, 2017, Andrew's Law was passed by North Dakota legislation, which requires law enforcement to thoroughly inform potential CIs of the risk and boundaries of participating, create a written agreement between parties, as well as provide training and/or certifications required to safely carry out these operations. To this day, we still have no idea what exactly happened to Andrew after he was seen on the dorm security camera, or how he ended up shot in the head, weighed down at the bottom of a river. His parents continue to strongly believe that their son was murdered. He was only 2 weeks away from graduating college when he died, and he appeared to be looking forward to continuing his young adult life, doing the job he was most passionate about with a girl that he loved. As far as my opinion on what happened to Andrew Sadek, I'm honestly kind of split, as controversial as that may be. I do think that it was suspicious that the exact same gun that was used to kill Andrew was missing from his parents' possession. Just because they didn't find it near his body doesn't mean he didn't use it somewhere else and end up downstream, or that he did it there and that the gun moved farther down the river. He also could have just taken it as protection like his family suggested. I don't know. As the Sadek family attorney stated, Andrew didn't realize that not cooperating with the sting operations really wasn't as big of a deal as they led him to believe. Being in the middle of this brand new situation could have been very stressful to Andrew, and since he grew up being really reserved and to himself, maybe he just didn't share his concerns with anybody else. He truly thought that his future would be ruined since he no longer wanted to be the police department's puppet, and maybe he just didn't see another way out. Then again, it is pretty suspicious that he was found wearing a completely different sweatshirt than he was last seen in weapon, which nobody recognized as being his, the fact that his wallet was missing, and that he had rocks in his backpack. It seems very odd that if he did take his own life, he'd go to such weird lengths to cover it up, but it isn't impossible, I suppose. Either way, I do think that the police department does have fault in this, like whether they stressed him out to the point of him feeling the need to take his own life, or whether they put him in a dangerous situation where somebody came after him and killed. I think that they need to take responsibility for that. Rachel Hoffman and Andrew Sadek were just two of the thousands of confidential informants who agree to help police in exchange for leniency each and every year. The danger and possibility of death that these people are subject to is in absolutely no comparison to their crimes. These young people who are improperly informed about this program, whose main objective is to benefit the police, certainly aren't going into this thinking that they're going to end up dead as a result of having small quantities of drugs. The people chosen for these operations are often already in difficult situations where they're involved with drugs, and then are pressured by the legal system to accept this deal, which turns out really to not be a great deal whatsoever. Especially in Andrew's case. He likely wasn't even going to get jail time, let alone the hefty prison sentence that he was threatened with by the sheriff. It's like these people are getting a carrot dangled in front of their faces and getting blindly led off of the end of a cliff. Kids as young as 14 years old are being placed into these unfair situations all over the United States. In most states, there are no regulations for these deals, and a lot of the times they're considered under the table without any legal protections for the participant. Police can mention the possibility of lighter punishments, but there are no legal obligation to follow through with these empty promises once the department reaps the benefit so that they can continue up the drug trade hierarchy. There have even been instances where police set up women in prostitution stings and put them in situations where they're expected to commit sexual acts in order to prove the crime and benefit authorities. It is really so exploitative and just predatory. I swear each and every week with these videos I grow more and more disdain for the way our legal system is set up, and I just can't. It's disgusting, and humanity should be ashamed that this is a common practice. More needs to be done. More definitely needs to be done. I want to thank you so much for sitting down and talking some true crime with me today so that we can educate ourselves around some of these serious yet less obvious flaws that exist in our society. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comments, as well as any recommendations you have for topics you'd like me to cover in the future. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell if you're interested in seeing me back here every week, same time, same place. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!